Good afternoon, everybody. It is 12 noon. Welcome to Lessons in Leadership. It is episode 26 today. I'm Mary Gregory, and I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Lulu Minns to be our guest today. Hello, Lulu.
Hi, Mary. And I just thought, actually, 26 is one of my lucky numbers because it's the day of my birthday. So 26 is a good number for me.
It's not your birthday today. No.
No.
It's not the 26th today. It's the 7th today. Confusing my adult brain, but there we go. Yes. Oh, that's really good. I like that. Well, really lovely to have you here. And I have to say that quite often I have people on my show here who I've known for many, many years, but you and I don't really know each other very well. I was attracted to you, and I'll be really honest as to why I was attracted to you, because you are, well, firstly, you're an advocate for women leaders and you run women retreats, which I think is fantastic. But also you run SheRebel Radio, which the name for me attracted you because there's something about being rebellious and pushing those limits, which really thought, oh, I've got to talk to that woman. So that's why I approached you. And that's why one of the reasons you're on my guest list and you're here today.
Oh,
so,
amazing. Yes. I'm glad that the name kind of called you, as it's kind of called a lot of women.
Absolutely. And I think it's an interesting word to explore, being a rebel. So I'm curious about what was behind the choice of that as a word for your radio and for your podcast.
Yeah, it was kind of, I've always had rebel running through a lot of my kind of marketing. And I say that I probably had it without even understanding why I did. And then I was doing some work with a coach in terms of archetypes with, your business, etc. And this was over in Canada. And it really came through that I really resonated with the rebel archetype, and actually quite a lot of emotion came up for me with that, because actually being a natural rebel and challenger, as I always have been, she helped me recognize, her name's Eleanor Beaton, she helped me recognize that that's what women come to me for. But also there'd been a lot of rejection in my life because of that, because it comes so naturally to me to challenge the status quo. So it just seemed a natural fit of those words that kind of followed on from that. SheRebel Radio, which I have trademarked, by the way.
Well, it's fantastic. I think it's great. And I mean, I think the reason it attracted me is what it brings up for me. So that there are negative connotations to rebel. So, we don't want over rebellious because we might have complete chaos on our hands, although that's not always a bad thing. It can be very creative. But I also think what's useful about rebelliousness or being a rebel is pushing the boundaries and innovating. And if we haven't got that in the world, then we're sadly missing. It's something we really need to have and be encouraging.
Yeah, and I often say, rebellion can be much quieter than it looks on the outside. And it really starts, and that's how I work with women, is it really starts from the inside out.
Yes.
And, when we work within corporate and when you come out of corporate, and you even notice it, again, because I'm a challenger, I might challenge people in positions of service that I don't want it this way, I want it that way. And what I really notice is that men are much more likely to break those rules for me and women are not. And there's a reason for that. And the reason is the double jeopardy. My background's in criminology, criminal defence, is that women doubly punished if we break the rules, not only for the rule that we've broken, but also for breaking the status quo of what it means to be female and to be a woman. So that can be why quite often women are less likely to break rules and break convention.
That's fascinating. So is that because I work with women a lot as well, and there is something around women tend to be more of a pleaser than men do. And I have to think about ego traps. Often women have that people-pleasing ego trap more than men would too as well.
Yeah, and I know you mentioned in your book about an overinflated ego or an underinflated ego, and not all, but a lot of women that I work with have that sense of an underinflated ego.
Yes.
But again, if it's overinflated, and I think I definitely had parts in the legal profession where mine was overinflated, which was sometimes good and sometimes not so good. I was more shoved back into my place by others than I would have been had I been a male. And I wasn't even aware of that was happening at the time.
Yes.
That makes sense.
Yes. I can totally, that does make sense, because it's kind of only on retrospect, often years down the line, that you might look back and think, oh gosh, yeah, that's what was going on there.
Yeah. I was kind of told a few times, tone it down, take a step back. And I was a criminal defence lawyer and advocate. So my job was to bring it forward and to challenge and to be heard. But I found as well, also in maturity, in becoming a woman who was stronger in what she was saying, with a little bit more force and more secure and confident in that. That didn't always go down very well.
Yeah. Gosh, that must have been quite tough.
Yeah, it was. But it was kind of only when I left and needed 2 years to recover, I probably realised how tough it was to be fighting that all the time for yourself as well as the clients.
Okay. So if you don't mind, I really would like to explore a bit more about your career as a lawyer and then your transition to what you do now. Because you were a lawyer for almost 12 years, which is a long time. And it sounds like you were working in a particularly tough area and probably male-dominated area of the law as well, in criminology. Tell me a bit about, what took you into that? Because, I mean, I know personally I find criminology completely fascinating. But what actually took you into the area of being a lawyer in that field?
Well, I first went into my first prison when I was 19. I wasn't younger than that, but, definitely, kind of male dominated and, kind of masculine energy. It's worst, really. But I didn't train to become a lawyer. I mean, I did, because obviously I became a lawyer, but it was always crime and criminology that fascinated me, and human behavior and why we do what we do, although kind of the darker side of that. And the only point that I can really pinpoint is the Jamie Bolger case, when I don't know if you recall that case.
I recall it. Yes,
I think it was 1991. I was the same age as the perpetrators of that offence, and was really fascinated as to why that would happen and what would make children act in that way towards another child. And I've always been an overthinker and trying to work out why the world is like it is. And I remember being at school that day and some of the boys in school making jokes about it, and me, being extremely empathetic, being quite, very horrified about what I'd heard, but also kind of intuitively feeling into what makes children behave in that way. So I think that's where that started for me.
So right back in childhood yourself then is when you started getting that curiosity. And what was your experience? You mentioned a little bit about your experience, that you were told to tone it down, or advised to tone it down when you were working in the law. But what was your experience of navigating that terrain as a woman in what is traditionally a male-dominated area?
It was kind of fun.
It's a great way of looking at it.
Yeah, it was kind of fun until it wasn't. So, I did used to, particularly because I was a police station representative as well, although, I was qualified, because you can get police station reps and not, fully qualified lawyers. But what would happen is, when I went to the police station, particularly because I was a young female at that time, still am, but, younger then, is that they would think I was a rep. And I wasn't fully qualified, and I wasn't aware as to how things unfolded in court. So I used to quite actually enjoy leading people into a false sense of security, and then kind of slamming them with something when they least expected it. So there was definitely advantages to that, because, they weren't expecting the force and power that I did have and do have. But kind of over long term, it's exhausting. And as I said, kind of the more secure I became in who I was and what I was saying, I felt like the more threatened other people were by that. And I found, even as a court advocate, sometimes, one of the male lawyers would interrupt me when I'm having a conversation with someone else, but it's nothing to do with them. So that was interesting.
Yeah, gosh, very frustrating, I would have thought, as well.
Yeah, and kind of like they were in charge of me.
Yes.
You need to kind of rein it back a bit. But, I also found on my feet as an advocate in the early stages that if I didn't really bring some force, I would be ignored or laughed at, or, again, particularly as a young female. So it was exhausting to bring that force.
So did you feel like you almost had to put up on a persona of being tough and forceful?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I in the last 2 years, I felt that persona kind of trying to almost slipping, but I kind of call it armor. I kind of felt in the morning I'd go to court, get my paperwork, and then it would, the armor would come on. And, bearing in mind, this is not just dealing with, other lawyers, judges, etc., also dealing with, people that have committed some really serious offences, rape, murder, etc. So, you really have to hold the space in the room and not let conversations go down a particular way. But ultimately that was exhausting after
Yeah.
Decade was
good. So, well done for getting through it that long. So what was the turning point moment for you then, Lulu, that caused you to, because now you're running women's retreats, you've completely transformed your life and what you bring and contribute to the world. So what was it that caused that moment of, I'm getting out of here? Or was it a gradual thing?
Definitely a gradual thing over a period of 2 years. I remember a night out, becoming quite emotional about work and wanting to change things, but not knowing how to do that. And it kind of continued. It was kind of like a downward slide from there. And I started just a business idea, which was in the dating industry back in 2014, was going to go part-time at work. And then partnership came up, male counterpart given partnership. I was, kind of too mouthy or whatever. So that was, but it was really an excuse for me to throw my toys out the pram and do what I wanted to do. So I needed that excuse, and I kind of wish I had left earlier, but hindsight's a wonderful thing. But also because I was working in legal aid, there were lots of legal aid cuts, so we were under pressure financially, and that took its toll. So it was a number of things, which and the legal system, in my opinion, I think it's come a long way since I left, but it's quite archaic, particularly if you're a court advocate. I just felt like there was this whole world out there of technology and opportunities, and I was still going to courts wearing robes, going back to way back when. And so I'm curious by nature, so as well as challenging, that I wanted to go out and find out what else there was.
Yeah. I'm also hearing how much bias you must have put up with in terms of you were too mouthy, in inverted commas, whereas in a man that might have been viewed as leadership. In a woman, it's too mouthy, or bossy is the classic one as well, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, feisty, bossy, that kind of stuff. But again, I think I was quite naive, and I hope that it's changing in terms of, thinking, climbing the ranks in positions of leadership, becoming a partner, that your opinion mattered. And actually, if you were different and you had something different to say, that would be an asset. Because I grew up in a very unconventional environment. My dad's a musician, my mum's an artist. I grew up in Brighton. But actually, it's more about fitting in and doing what you're told, and that's just not me by nature. So
completely the antithesis of rebel, isn't it? So yeah, amazing. So this is really, really fascinating story. So you then moved out of the law and moved into establishing yourself as a coach and an advocate of women. And that took you about 2 years, did I hear you say earlier on?
Yeah, I had about a year of dipping into various things, none of which were for me, but, just in that panic of how on earth am I going to pay the bills? And, I wish I'd actually taken more time and more space for myself, which is why I'm actually passionate about creating retreats for women, amongst many other things. And and then I launched coaching properly in 2016. And haven't looked back since. So five years.
Fantastic. And what caused you to focus on women particularly? Is it because of your own experiences, or tell us a bit more about that?
It wasn't intentional initially. When I first started coaching, I focused on burnt out lawyers because that's what I knew to, reconnect with themselves, etc. But what I found was that it was women that were coming to me with very similar experiences. And then other women were coming to me for similar experiences. And I really started to look at, and it's still a big basis of what I teach, about feminine principles of success. And actually, we've learned in a very masculine and patriarchal way of how we can be successful. And it was for many of those reasons that women were feeling quite exhausted. And then when I looked at it deeper, because that's what I do, I'm kind of like, that's why the world's in such a mess, because, we're so, not balanced within that, and how do we lead differently? And I had a few guys right at the outset who were interested in the work that I was doing, but I've never been paid by a guy to coach them. So it wasn't intentional on my part. It kind of just
evolved. Yes. And you mentioned feminine principles around leadership. Particularly in today's world, which is, we are going through all this cataclysmic change, the whole idea of not really knowing what's around the corner, dealing with the emergent, dealing with crises like we've just managed over the last year or so. How can a female, and I say I kind of talk about feminine and masculine energy
Mm-hmm.
because I think men and women have both to different degrees. So as a woman, I know I have some masculine energy in me and can be very direct about things, but I've also got feminine as well. So what, from the feminine point of view, how can they contribute from your perspective in a positive way to what's happening now?
Yeah, there's so many ways, you know, and actually, you know, kind of when the pandemic hit, the first lockdown, we were in lockdown for 12 weeks, and I'd had 12 weeks, you know, being contractually unable to work when I left the legal profession. So, for example, is one of the feminine principles that I teach is contraction is the key to expansion. Contraction is an energy of getting smaller and withdrawing. We don't value that in society. We see it as a very negative thing. We see it as a very negative thing in the economy, but the economy contracts and expands all the time. That's what it does. If anyone invests in stocks and shares, it does it all day long. But what we value is expansion, 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 which is a masculine principle. And look where we are now. When you inflate something and continue, because expansion is valued without the contraction, what we get is you know, an explosion, tsunamis, you know, mental health breakdowns, etc. So that is an example. We don't need to be in expansion all the time. If we are, then, you know, it's not a good thing. So how can we value a feminine principle such as contraction and withdrawing and becoming smaller before we expand? And, you know, to put it in a more, and in other ways, women can't receive pleasure or give birth without contracting. That's how important it is. But we, you know, it's a fundamental natural law, but we live in a world that values the masculine energy over the feminine.
Yes, I totally get that. And I think one of the refreshing things about lockdown was having that space to sit back, to reflect, to just be quiet rather than be out there doing all the time, which is the more masculine approach as well, isn't it?
Yeah, and Mother Nature will always force contraction if we don't listen. She's a powerful energy. And, you know, as women, men and women, we all embody that. But as women, most of us, not all of us, might embody more of that energy. So actually, how do we bring that and encourage people, for example, to take a step back before we step forward? And historically, women, we were gatekeepers of nature, of Mother Earth, you know, etc. So there's a lot of correlation with women not being in leadership and the state of the planet right now.
Right. That is. So say a bit more about that. That's fascinating.
Which part?
Oh gosh, well, where do we start with it? Because it is a huge thing, isn't it? So if women had been more in it, well, I'm not saying, because I don't want to get into men against women. I think we have to work together. It's absolutely both genders working together. That's what creates the best for everybody.
It's about balance and harmony, and we must find that balance and harmony within ourselves, fundamentally, with those two energies before we can, you know, kind of bring it in. Because, you know, for example, if we've got loads of women in positions of leadership that are leading from overly masculine energy, then it's not going to be any different.
No, that's right. And if you remember, it was the 70s, it was the 80s with the big shoulder pads and the whole thing about women trying to emulate the way men were being. And it's more recently that it's much more about be your authentic self, because actually we need what both genders can bring, and we need what both energies can bring. Certainly in the workplace that's needed, but also from the looking after the planet as a whole as well. All
of those things. The big shoulder pads. And I've had very interesting conversations with men in business that have been in business for a long time, in terms of, you know, working with women who were breaking the ground, you know, in the 1980s and things like that, and how kind of different that was. And it's really about changing things now. It's not necessarily fitting into a masculine paradigm of success and power, and us needing to people please and belong within that structure. We have to have the confidence to start changing it.
Yes, absolutely. And I think what the key things is dialogue between the genders, dialogue between anybody or anywhere where there's diversity or difference, to understand each other better.
Because a lot of I saw kind of a negative thread on LinkedIn earlier today. You know, if people trying to understand where you know, we're coming from in terms of, you know, gender, race, all of those things. And it's really important to open those safe spaces that we can have those conversations, because a lot of them are unconscious biases. And it's only through conversation and safe spaces that we can begin to change that. But
Absolutely.
also exclusion is fundamental to that. People ask me, why do you just host retreats for women? Because it's important to create the language and the narrative in rooms with women.
Yes. I agree with you on that score, because I'm all for bringing the sexes together and having that dialogue. But I also know that I run women's leadership programs, and we really advocate for it just being women only. Because if you bring men in too soon, the dynamic of what's happening outside in the workplace starts to get recreated, and women don't get their needs met. Their confidence doesn't build as quickly as it does when it's a women's only program.
Yeah, and I've seen, time and time again, and it's no disrespect to men, and I know they don't mean to do it, but I've even seen it at women's events, and there were two guys there, and their voice is heard probably 80% more than the women there. And again, I don't think they see it or they realise, because not all, but lots of men are used to having their voices heard.
Yeah,
and actually women are not. And I think women as well, again, not all, we're much more conversational. Like there's not that many women that I know, like, oh, I've got 20 minutes to myself where I've got the stage. That's quite a masculine paradigm. And women often squeeze themselves to fit into that. But again, that's why I host retreats. You have your, women's leadership groups where often it's really conversational.
Yeah. So tell us a bit more about your retreats, Lulu. What caused you to start them in the first place, and what are they like? What can people experience on them?
Yeah, well, I started, was it 2017? I can't remember, but the first retreat I did was in Morocco, so I didn't make it easy for myself. I was getting cash out of the machine because you can't transfer money and all sorts of stuff. You can't take it with you because it's illegal to have it here in the UK. So I didn't make it easy for myself, but I hired a beautiful riad, and I used to host retreats as part of a coaching program of my clients working with me. And I still remember, hearing my clients arrive, and they'd all met online, way before the pandemic. I was working online, and hearing that support that they gave to each other. But more recently, in the last couple of years, I've kind of broken those retreats away from, a bigger program, and, offered them, more exclusively to women to just come to a retreat. And it was because so many of my clients were saying to me, the retreat was such a turning point for me. I've still got the notebook. That changed everything for me. And I really wanted to widen that. So this year was the first year that me and my business partner, Gemma, who does incredible yoga, so a lot about embodiment and things. We can't just change it up here. We have to change how we feel about things, particularly for women. And we've got 3 that we're doing this year in June, August and October. We've nearly sold out of the summer retreats. We've only got 2 spaces left. So quite a bold move in the pandemic, but worst case scenario, we have to move them, and we attract such incredible women that we've had to do that before, and they've just been like absolutely fine.
Well, that's my next question. What sort of women are attracted to your retreats?
Female entrepreneurs. Our retreats are exclusively for female entrepreneurs and women in business. So, sometimes we tend to bring women who are consultants, working within business or thinking about leaving and working, within their own businesses. And we have 3. Feminist Success Retreat is in June. 3 Keys to Self-Actualization is in August. So that's women actualizing their purpose and potential. A lot of that is around the self-expression piece and voice. And then Space and Significance Retreat in October, finding that space to reach your greater significance, which again, so many women haven't had space this year with having children and caring for other people. It's, when we look at the likes of Carl Jung, etc., and those thought leaders, they had maids, servants, wives, all of that. And that's not a privilege that many women have.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I know I've been running lots of online events with women with their kids in the background when they've been homeschooling and all sorts of things. You just have to learn to go with rather than resist that, really. Tough.
Yeah, it's really tough.
Anyway, and I'm curious as a final sort of question about your purpose as to what drives you then, because you obviously are offering a fantastic service and experience for the people that come on your retreats. What is it that really motivates you about all of this?
Oh, so many things. It's difficult. It's you know, that equality of women in positions of leadership and power, whether that's in their businesses, in corporate, in politics, etc. Because I just feel we have so much to offer. We've only scratched the surface of what that is, and it needs to be different to what's out there. And I've always said I've always been an advocate, you know, as well as, you know, crime always interested me. I've always been an advocate and making sure that women's voices are heard.
Yes.
And we had our first SheRebel radio roundtable. I know you wanted to make it, actually, and unfortunately had an appointment with a client, I think. But
yes.
Yeah, which was, you know, very discussion based, and is, you know, been released as a podcast episode today. And, you know, it's just so important that women's voices are heard, because that's really the only way that we can change things and go deeper. And I kind of got fed up with the surface level stuff of it. And I think, you know, it's great that the women's movement has become, you know, so mainstream, but I also feel like a lot of it's been dumbed down.
Right. I like the going deeper bit. Because for me, that's how you create sustainable change. You can't just deal with it at a surface level. You have to go deeper, because it's down to values and beliefs that make the difference.
And we can't, you know, we can't also just point the finger, you know, it has to, and I think doorbell's going, you know, create blame or anything like that. It's really, all of this great change really does start with, firstly, ourselves as individuals, but then ourselves as a collective of women who are contributing to leadership and to, you know, feminine principles, and supporting and strengthening each other in bringing those into the wider world.
And you mentioned that it was dumbed down. I know. Say a bit more about that.
So just, I think, you know, it can be, and I've used pink in my branding, but just a bit, you know, pink, high heels, boss babe, you know, all of that kind of stuff. And I think it was, you know, it had its place at the outset of like, oh, you know, of kind of highlighting, you know, but it just doesn't go deep enough. And I think, you know, there's people that can jump on the bandwagon in terms of supporting women, but what work are you actually doing to really support women? You know, in terms of.
I totally get it. I can see what you mean. And actually, to me, whenever I see high heels in the boardroom or something like that, I think, no, that's not what it's about.
No.
And actually, whoever invented high heels, they want crucifying. They're just awful things. Anyway.
My days are done wearing high heels. I did my whole
Me too.
Although I did feel, because I felt taller in court. I mean, I'm 5'6" anyway, but I did, you know, that kind of more deeper spiritual side of me. I did heard it shut. They shut off the heart chakra apparently. So. Which is an energy in itself. So
no, you want to be walking forever. Stilettos just ruin it all, really.
Well, I live in Cornwall now, so there's no room for heels.
I bet it's all on the beach and flip-flops, I should imagine.
Yeah, definitely.
Anyway, Lulu, it has been absolutely delightful to talk to you. You know, we could go on forever probably, which is what I say to lots of my guests, but particularly I'm getting a sense of that with you. And any parting shots? I mean, we're coming through our lockdown. Thank goodness, it's the summers ahead. But anything else you'd like to share as a final reflection with our audience?
Just women, you know, having conversations, supporting each other, and truly supporting each other, and not just kind of on the surface level or on social media, etc., about really living and breathing that and trusting that, and having a break from all the surface level stuff, because again, I think social media is great and we can, you know, me and you connected so easily and stuff, but we talked about the deep work a couple of times. It can really encourage kind of shallow work and mirroring other people's work and all of that. So, you know, take the time out, whether that's at one of my retreats or somewhere else, but you know, to really do the deep work and understand why you're here and what it is that you're here to contribute, because it's very different for each and every one of us.
Wonderful words of wisdom. Thank you so much. And we will be in touch and be speaking again, I'm sure, at some point in the future. Thank you. Amazing. And thank you to everyone for watching now or watching in catch up. It's always good to have your comments. Do make them in the boxes below. I always answer to every one of them. And for next week, I'm very pleased to welcome another amazing woman leader, actually, Anne Taylor, who is author of the book Soft Skills, Hard Results, and spent many, many years in a huge corporation as a senior leader, Nestle. She's now an executive coach and has written this book. And what I love about it is the clarity it brings to the whole value around our softer skills and how they make a difference to the bottom line. So do join us next week at 12 noon to meet Anne Taylor. Thank you so much for watching, and see you again next week. Thanks again, Lulu.